Okay, so we've successfully installed the head box. As you can see here, just as a reminder, double check, make sure it's set up correctly before you start installing brackets and shades. This is for a regular roll. Shades coming off the back, which is the flat side. Your runner or lip here is on the front for the closure to hang off of. So we have our head box oriented correctly. We've also installed the IZMC here. Again, make sure that you just remove the cover over the double-sided tape on the back. So you can just stick the tabs up here. This pops on and off of those tabs. Okay, so it's very simple and easy to install and remove, okay, if you need to. I have it over a little bit further than it probably should be. I'd probably say about 6 inches to the outside edge. Probably where you need to be. You know, I'm closer to probably about 9 here. But that needs to go up first. This needs to be oriented correctly. This needs to be good and solid, which it is. Next thing we're going to do is install the motor side bracket. This needs to be done first. I'm then going to install the idler bracket next. So on the motor side bracket, make sure that you go with a 3/4 inch self-tapper. Okay, this has a vibration reduction pad on it, which takes up a little bit of space. And keep in mind, the top 1/4 inch of this is pretty much useless. There's no threads. So you really have 1/2 inch of threads on a 3/4 inch self-tapper, which is really what you need to get through the bracket, the pad, and through the head box and have a really good bite. Also, washers may or may not be needed, just depends on the head. These are number 8s, so it has the larger head on it. If it's a number 10 or something smaller, if I think I have my numbers right, 8's larger, 10 smaller, I think. Don't take my word for it. But I'm going to put washers on here, just good practice, because the slots in these brackets are pretty large. So what I've done, since I made the mistake of putting my L brackets in the same place where my shade brackets are going to go, I had to pre-drill the L brackets. That's already been done. That way you didn't have to watch me do it. Now, what I'm going to do then, since they're already pre-drilled, it's going to be a piece of cake to put the self-tappers through. I'm not really tapping into anything. I've pre-drilled it, but you'll get to see on the idler side, you know, the process of just using a self-tapper. So let's get going here. Get my screw on my drill. Let's get this centered in the box front to back. So make sure it's centered front to back. And make sure that it's plumb square. Okay, I'm lining it up with my marks. And again, when you're using a self-tapper, try not to stare right at where you're screwing, because you'll get some shavings. And when they land in your eye, it's not fun. So that's one screw there on the back side. Let's go ahead and do the one for the front here. Again, just give it a good look. Make sure that it's square. If it's not square, make sure it is, because if it isn't, the motor will not set correctly in this white quick connect. It's really important you get it square so that it snaps in there and stays in there. Because if this happens to be crooked, the tabs on the outside edges of the bracket, or the sub-bracket here, will not grab that motor correctly. We certainly want to make sure that those tabs grab that motor and grab it well. Okay, this one's taken care of. Mount the L bracket where my shade bracket is going, which is best practice. Okay, I just got lucky here, because again, I didn't think that through, but I don't have to worry about trying to penetrate the L bracket. All I have to worry about is penetrating the box. So this is where self-tappers come in really handy. So again, get my idler bracket here, make sure it's centered front to back. The hitch pin is in here for the shade. I'm going to remove it. It's kind of in my way. So we'll take the hitch pin out. That way I can just focus solely on the bracket. Again, I'm going to get it lined up with the edge of the box. Okay, there's one down. Again, make sure it's plumb. It's going to make getting the idler end in the cradle much easier. Again, try not to look directly at where you're screwing. Okay, that one's good to go. So the next thing we're going to focus on is installing the motor side section of this coupled system. And we're going to install the coupler bracket at the same time. The reason for that is it's on the motor side the only way you can do it. Okay, since the motor side snaps in first, you then have no way of getting the coupler into this bracket once you have the motor side snapped in. Now, on the idler end, it's a little bit different. And I'll show you that when we get there, because the coupler end goes in first. But in this particular instance, and always, your motor end is going to go in first with a 110 volt system. If it's an AC system. If it's a DC system, your idler end goes in first, typically. So just remember, AC motor system, the motor goes first. DC motor system, you can do it either way. I prefer to do the idler end first on a DC motor system because it has a retractable idler. This particular system has a idler, which I don't have here, that I'll show you, that is adjustable, but it's not what we would call a retractable spring-loaded idler. So we'll take a quick little break here. I'll get a helping hand. This is a two-man job now, so I'm going to get another hand to help. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're on to installing the motor side of the 2-on-1 coupled system. I have my trusty helper Vince here. So what he's going to do is he's going to plug in the motor to the IZMC, and then he's going to guide the motor end into the motor bracket. And I will then simultaneously install the coupler bracket as we're more or less finishing up this portion of the installation. So I'm handing him the motor end. Make sure that the motor cord is pulled towards the side that's going to have the closure on it. So we're going to pull the motor cord. Go ahead and plug that IZMC in, Vince, if you would. So that just plugs right into the port. Okay, pull that motor cord tight against the motor head so it doesn't get between the motor head and the bracket, and bring it around to the side that the closure is going to be on. In this case, it's the front side. He's then going to get it lined up with the motor bracket. Okay.
Push it.
Is it in?
Yep, should be.
Yep, it's in. Okay, so it'll lock. Now the way to check to make sure that it's in is I'm going to pull to the left. Yep, see, it's not snapped in there quite right. You want to make sure you hear it snap.
1 second, it's the RF cord as well.
Pull that, yeah, there you go. So just make sure all the cords are out of the way so they're not in between the motor end and the bracket. There we go. Now he's going to push against the bracket. I'm going to push against the bracket at the same time. Okay, I heard a snap. So I'm going to pull left, straight off. It's not coming. Okay, so I know it's in there. All right, so we got our motor side secure. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the coupler bracket onto this end with the foot of the bracket facing out. Okay, make sure that the foot is facing out. Obviously you can't get the screws in if it's facing in because the shade roll is there, okay? So the foot of the bracket is facing out. I have my self-tapping screws already set, and I've already pre-drilled this because, again, I made that mistake of putting my L bracket where my shade brackets go. So now I'm just going to put in the second screw. Into my pre-drilled hole instead of tapping, and we are secure. So at this point in time, we have all of our brackets up. We have the motor side of the shade system up. Next thing that we're going to do is do the idler end. So we'll be right back to do that next. Okay, one very important thing I forgot to mention. Before you start, make sure your hands are very clean. Some of these fabrics will really grab fingerprints, so make sure that you've washed your hands after doing whatever it is you've been doing to make them dirty. just so you don't have any handprints on the fabric. Certainly it doesn't look very good from the outside, and your customer will probably complain. All right, so what we're going to do, what's really important is Vince is going to drive the right side of this onto the coupler hub and shaft. Now make sure that you have it lined up so that your hem bar, the bottom pocket, is in alignment. If they're not in alignment, you're going to be off and you're going to have to do it all over again. So just make sure it's a 45-degree change because they're square hubs. Okay, so just make sure you've got it on there correctly, otherwise you'll be off by 45 degrees or 90 degrees or more. So he has it set. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push towards that shaft as I'm lifting it up. Okay, that way I don't rub the wall. And as I continue to move the shade up, I can force it on there further. So as I continue to move it up, and I have it forced on there all the way, now I'm going to go around and up and over the cradle, okay, on this side. Now if you have to, you may have to get your finger in here and get your idler shaft squared up so that it will drop right down into the cradle bracket. Okay, stick your finger up in here, just get it squared up so it'll set right in there. Last thing is the hitch pin. Okay, very important. Don't forget to put this in. We're going to just put this through the hole here. What you might have to do is just run your shade up just a little bit just to get the holes matched up with one another. And then you can put the hitch pin right through and get those holes lined up. Now if this gives you any trouble, one thing that I recommend is to get yourself something very narrow, like a very small screwdriver, perhaps a very small Phillips screwdriver. And what you can do is put this through the hole to guide the two so that they line up together so you can put your hitch pin through. So let me grab something, I'll be right back. So a very small Phillips screwdriver like this works best. If you have something longer than this, it's even better. But what I can do with this is I can run it up through the hole on the cradle, and then I can move it back and forth left to right till I find the hole on the idler shaft, and then I have them lined up. The reason why this one's giving me a little bit of trouble is this bracket tends to flare in just a little bit at the bottom. So now I know what to do. I'm going to press out on the bracket as I put the hitch pin through here. There we go. Piece of cake. Pop it up all the way so it's secure. So check to make sure your hem bars are in alignment in the center. Okay, so both of those hem bars are in alignment. We have everything in here secure. We know the motor end's secure. We know the idler end is secure with the hitch pin. Next thing we're going to do is focus on addressing the motor. Well, before we do that, we'll wire up the motor. We'll go through that, and then we'll go through the steps of addressing the motor to the transmitter, setting your limits, and then getting it calibrated with the interface, and then getting it on the network. So we're getting close. A few more steps to go, and we're already there. And then we'll put the closure plate on to finish it off.